Hey guys, my name is Boris and I'm a sixth semester computer engineering bachelor student at the Technical University of Berlin. And on this channel I want to talk about things that I've learned and might bring value, general educational topics and perhaps a few lifestyle videos. Today I want to talk about what tech I would recommend for a computer engineering student. There typically are a few questions you ask yourself before starting to study, and I myself ask them as well. For example, what operating system should I use? Do I have to use a tablet or can I use a hybrid machine? How powerful does my workstation have to be, or how many books do I have to buy? It all quickly comes to the point where you think it adds up to be very expensive. But I will try to sum up my experience and give you my recommendations. So let's get started with the operating systems. I will focus only on the main operating systems like Windows, macOS and Linux, and ignore something like Chrome OS and so on. So let's start with Windows. And I don't know how to phrase it, but it's a not very pleasant experience. Out of the three operating systems, it is clearly the worst. You will almost always work with a Linux or rather Unix command line, and although Windows supports a subsystem for that, it is just an annoying workaround. Then there is setting up something like Visual Studio Code, which is one of my favorite editors, or IDEs, which is pretty annoying. Another point is the structure of the OS. Since it's not Unix-based, it is a different structure, and you will learn how to work with a Unix-based structure. And the last thing I want to mention is that you may really work with applications or programs or systems that only run on Unix or even only on Linux. And this is really annoying. But really, overall, I wouldn't recommend using Windows for your studying. Next, there would be macOS, and I'll try to be as unbiased as I can, since I'm a little Apple fanboy. But straight away, Apple is based on Unix, such as Linux is, and this is a great advantage. You basically have the same command line interaction. Setting up VS Code is effortless, and macOS has basically the same structure as Linux because of its Unix base. In addition, the amount of power and efficiency a Mac or MacBook has, especially with the M1 chip or the following M2 chips or M1X chips or whatever, is just absurd. Plus, in my opinion, macOS looks pretty good. But if you don't really care about the visuals of macOS or generally just don't like Apple, Linux will be your safest bet. It checks all the boxes I've talked about, the Unix base, and most importantly, the application support. Of course, there are applications, or more specifically user applications, that are, for example, only for Mac, but for development, Linux is basically the way to go, and everyone develops their programs for Linux. You may ask why. Well, because it's free. Almost every research facility for a bit more in-depth software development or engineering is able to require the user to have Linux, provided they have a PC, but almost everyone will have a PC. The question is if it's Mac or Windows. Since Linux is free, they can expect the employees to have Linux. To ask your employee to have a Mac to be able to work with the facility is not that easy. So to sum up the OS choice, I prefer macOS because of the hardware, the design of the software, and overall because I can basically do almost everything with it except when I have to work with Linux specific applications. But if you really don't care about the design or the specific hardware, Linux is your best bet. Buy something like a ThinkPad and install a Linux distribution like Ubuntu. But power-wise, the Mac with its M1 is undefeated. Even PC guys like Dave2D would recommend a M1 MacBook Air, and so would I. I really would recommend to try, if you can, to save a bit more money for 1 or 2 or 3 months more and try to afford a M1 MacBook Air. But if you really don't care or you just want your working PC, please feel free to go for Linux, of course. Well, that was a long talk about operating systems. Let's now continue with the writing tool of choice, a tablet. And I'll say it straight away, an iPad is the only choice. Power-wise, design-wise, OS-wise, application-wise, it's just undefeated. I have had a Surface Book 2 for my first year because I had this process of thinking to myself, I need a new laptop and a tablet, but I couldn't afford both at once. But, oh boy, the experience really was, and I'm sorry to say that, pretty awful. I mean, the concept is really okay, but the overheating, the issues when connected with an external monitor and how to work with it then as a tablet and general working with something like OneNote is pretty annoying. Although I generally like the structure OneNote can build up for the folders or for the pages themselves. You have basically an infinite depth of your folders, I think at least. But maybe I will talk about those applications in a future video. The new iPad Air is really the best thing you can go for. It's basically an iPad Pro but cheaper. The standard iPad will really do fine as well. Just iPad has far more superior note-taking apps like Notability or GoodNotes. So what I want to say is an iPad is way better than any other tablet choice out there. And writing on a tablet, or rather iPad, is far more superior or convenient than writing on paper. Now, of course, there are people that just don't like writing on an iPad because of the smooth surface, but there are options for that as well, like the paper-like screen protector to give you a rough surface. And there's like a pencil cap you can put on top of your Apple Pencil. I forgot the brand name, but yeah. Let's continue with the last thing I want to address, buying books. At least in my experience, you really don't need to buy any books for a computer engineering program, or even more generally speaking, for an engineering degree. I bought one book in my first semester because I had this mindset of, I'm going to study, I need books, but I have not once looked into this thick electrical engineering principles book. Everything is online in the presentations, especially now with this times, you will have the presentations online. And if you really need to look up additional information, the internet is your very best friend. But if you really need to look into a specific book, then you will most likely have a library at your university and you'll be able to borrow the book there, and there's no need to buy any and spend money on books. And books really are expensive. So overall, I would say you really only need a PC or preferably a Mac and an iPad if you can afford to buy one. But you could really look at it as an investment. Nevertheless, I really understand that it is not a necessity, it's more of a really big convenience thing. Except the PC, you really need a PC to be able to code and upload homework. But I genuinely think that all of you have a PC at home. And if you have a Windows PC, then you can easily dual boot into a Linux distribution. If you're thinking about what is better, to buy a PC with Linux and Windows as a dual boot, or only Linux, or a tablet, I would 100% recommend buying an iPad. Working with your PC will be really just fine, and in future you will perhaps want to upgrade. But for now, the convenience of an iPad is just amazing. Plus, when buying a new Apple product, you will get a few percentages off because you are a student. Okay, with that said, I hope you've enjoyed this video and found it helpful for your decision process. If you want to see what you can possibly learn in a computer engineering bachelor degree, take a look at this playlist here. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!